Hello. I thought my wife was just working late, until I followed her and uncovered a secret that tore her world apart. What happened next was the ultimate payback she never saw coming. I'm Eric, 36, and for the past 8 years, I thought I was married to the love of my life, Sarah. She's 34, smart, beautiful, and has this way of making people feel like they're the only ones in the room when she's talking to them. That's what drew me in from the start. She had this charisma that was impossible to ignore. But now, I wish I had. The past few months have been like living in a suspense movie where I'm the only one who doesn't know how it ends. It started in the most mundane way possible, which makes it all the more sinister. Sarah was always glued to her phone, but lately, it wasn't just for work or checking Instagram. I'd catch her glancing at her screen, her lips curling into a half smile, and the moment I'd ask, she'd lock it and slide it into her pocket. The first time I saw it, I thought it was weird, but I let it go. Everyone's allowed a little privacy, right? But then, there were the late nights. The first time she came home at 11 p.m., she said it was a work emergency. I'm sorry, babe, but my boss is an idiot and can't handle anything without me, she'd said, rolling her eyes. I even laughed it off because it sounded just like her. But it didn't stop there. One late night turned into 3, then a whole week. And then, one day, she came home smelling like a different perfume. Not hers, not mine, something floral and almost intoxicating. I couldn't place it, and I didn't ask because I didn't want to sound crazy. But here's where it gets weird. Sarah was always upfront about her friends. If she was going out, she'd tell me who she was with, where they were going, and when she'd be back. But now, she'd get these mysterious calls at odd hours, slip out onto the balcony, and when she came back, she'd act like nothing happened. I tried asking once, and she brushed it off like I was being paranoid. It's just a friend from work, Eric. Why are you so jumpy? She said with a laugh. That laugh, there was something off about it, like she was laughing at a joke that I didn't get. I was a fool to ignore it. Then, there was the night that really set everything off. Sarah had said she'd be working late again, which had become our new normal. But when I looked out the window, I saw her car parked down the street, just sitting there, engine running. It was dark, and she was inside, talking to someone on the phone. She didn't see me, but I could see her, nodding, laughing, and then she hung up, just sat there, staring at her hands like she was deciding something. After a few minutes, she drove off. It was such a small moment, but it felt like I just watched the ending of a movie I didn't understand. What was she doing out there? Who was she talking to? Why did it feel like I was the one missing something? After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Every excuse, every late night, every time she laughed at her phone, it all added up to this uneasy, gnawing suspicion. So when she said she was heading out for a work dinner, I decided I wasn't going to sit around and wonder anymore. I grabbed my keys, waited a few minutes, and then followed her. She drove across town, but not to the fancy restaurant she mentioned. Instead, she ended up in a rundown part of the city, pulling into the parking lot of a cheap motel. My stomach was in knots, but I kept my distance, parked a few spaces away, and watched as she got out of the car and disappeared into one of the rooms. I didn't know what to think, but deep down, I had this sickening feeling that my worst fears were about to be confirmed. I waited there for almost 2 hours, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight they ached. Every time I tried to think of a reason she'd be here, my mind just went blank. But then, a man stepped out of the room, tall, well-dressed, the kind of guy who looked like he had everything under control. He adjusted his collar, glanced around, and started walking towards his car. I don't know what came over me, but I got out of my car and approached him. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he'd be able to hear it. "Hey," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. He turned, looked me up and down, and raised an eyebrow. "Yeah," he said, his tone casual, like he hadn't just walked out of a room where my wife was. I tried to sound as nonchalant as I could. I'm sorry, I'm just curious. The woman you were with, who is she? He seemed taken aback for a moment, then smirked, like he was amused by the question. Oh, her. Just a girl for the night, he said, shrugging. I don't even know her real name. She goes by Amber or something. What, did you like her too? He chuckled, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card, handing it to me. Here. She's good, if you're into that sort of thing. Just don't expect any discounts. I took the card without even thinking, staring at it like it was some kind of alien object. It was black, glossy, with a single phone number and the name Amber printed on it. He must have seen the confusion on my face because he laughed, slapped me on the shoulder, and said, "Good luck, man." Then he got into his car and drove off, leaving me standing there, holding this business card like it was a grenade about to go off. I don't know how long I stood there, just staring at that little piece of cardboard. My mind was blank, like it couldn't process what had just happened. Amber. A girl for the night. My wife. My Sarah. Finally, I got back into my car, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. I didn't know what to do, what to think. Part of me wanted to throw that card out the window and forget this whole nightmare ever happened, but I couldn't. I sat there for what felt like hours, just trying to make sense of the whole situation, but there was nothing to make sense of. Nothing that could explain why she was here, in this place, with this man who saw her as nothing more than a transaction. Eventually, I drove home, the card still clutched in my hand. I walked through the front door, past the living room, straight to the bathroom, and just stared at myself in the mirror. I barely recognized the guy looking back. He looked hollow, like a ghost. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing for sure, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. After what happened at the motel, I couldn't just sit back and pretend everything was normal. I spent the rest of that night lying awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together a reality that made sense. Who was that man? What was she doing there? And why did he act like she was just some random girl he'd hired? The next morning, I was running on nothing but adrenaline and a gnawing need for answers. Sarah was still asleep, and I watched her for a moment, trying to understand how the woman I'd shared my life with for 8 years could have this whole other side I knew nothing about. She stirred, and I quickly turned away, not ready to face her yet. Instead, I grabbed my keys and drove to her office. If I was going to get some clarity, I needed to start there. I'd been to her workplace before, she worked at a marketing firm downtown, and we'd been to a few of their office parties. I remembered how she used to talk about her colleagues, the projects, the long hours. But lately, it was like work had become this vague, shadowy place she only mentioned in passing. She never shared any stories anymore, and if I asked, she'd quickly change the subject. I walked up to the reception, and there was a young woman behind the desk, typing away on her computer. She glanced up as I approached, and I forced a smile. "Hi, I'm looking for Sarah Collins. Is she in today?" The receptionist's face brightened. "Oh, Sarah. I remember her. Such a sweetheart." But then her smile faltered, and she tilted her head slightly, as if she was trying to make sense of my question. "She doesn't work here anymore." I blinked, trying to process what she just said. "What do you mean? She doesn't work here?" "She left a few months ago," the receptionist said, her tone casual, as if she had no idea she'd just turned my world upside down. "I think it was around 3 months back. Something about moving on to a new opportunity, but I'm not really sure." My mouth went dry. "Are you sure?" She never mentioned anything about quitting," I stammered, feeling the walls close in around me. The receptionist looked at me with a mix of sympathy and confusion, like she couldn't quite figure out why this was news to me. "Yeah, I'm sure. I remember her farewell party. She was really close with the team. It was a bit of a surprise, but she seemed excited about whatever she was doing next. My heart was pounding, and it felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, with nothing but empty air below me. Do you have any idea where she went? Like, did she say which company? I'm sorry, she said, shaking her head. I don't think she mentioned it. But you could try asking around. Maybe someone in the marketing department would know more. I barely managed to thank her before I turned and stumbled out of the building. The cool morning air hit my face, but it did nothing to clear the fog in my mind. I sat down on a bench outside, trying to piece it all together. Sarah hadn't worked here for 3 months. 3 months. What had she been doing every day when she left the house? Where had she been going? I thought back to all those late nights at the office, all the times she'd brushed off my questions about work, the times she'd come home looking tired but satisfied, like she'd conquered the world that day. It was all a lie. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I married, had been living a double life, and I had no idea what was real anymore. I didn't know where to go from here, but I knew I couldn't just go back home and pretend everything was fine. I needed to dig deeper, to find out where she'd been spending her time, who she'd been spending it with, and why she had gone to such lengths to hide it from me. Because now, the truth wasn't just something I wanted, it was something I needed. I don't know what I was thinking when I pulled out that business card again. It had been burning a hole in my pocket since the night I got it, but I hadn't had the courage to dial the number. Part of me was terrified of what I might find out, and another part was hoping that the whole thing would somehow make sense if I just waited long enough. But after hearing that Sarah hadn't worked at her office for 3 months, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed answers, no matter how much they might hurt. I sat in my car, staring at the card. Amber, it read, along with a phone number. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to take a deep breath and dial. It felt like I was about to step off a cliff, with no idea what was waiting for me at the bottom. The phone rang once, twice, and then a smooth, professional voice answered. Hello, you've reached Amber's service line. How can I assist you today? The voice was calm, polite, like she was used to handling all kinds of requests without batting an eye. But it wasn't my wife. It was someone else entirely, a woman who sounded like she could have been managing reservations at a high-end hotel. I froze for a moment, my mind racing, trying to figure out what to say. Hi, I stammered. I'm just trying to. I'm not sure, I mean. Not to worry, the woman interrupted smoothly. We offer a range of services, and I'm here to help you with whatever you need. Could you tell me what kind of service you're interested in? We can arrange a private meeting, a group event, or something more discreet if that's your preference. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. There was no mistaking what she was talking about. This wasn't some innocent line, this was a full-fledged service. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. I struggled to keep my voice steady. I was hoping to, schedule a private meeting. Just a one-on-one, I managed to say, trying not to sound like I had no idea what I was doing. Of course, she said, her tone as polite and unflinching as ever. We can accommodate that. Can you please provide the preferred location, time, and day for the meeting? My head was spinning. I hadn't thought this through at all, and now I was fumbling my way through a conversation I never imagined I'd be having. I tried to think of a place, any place, and blurted out the name of a hotel downtown, the same one where Sarah and I had spent our anniversary a couple of years ago. Tomorrow evening, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Around 8 p.m. And would you prefer this to be a discreet arrangement? She asked, her voice softening, almost as if she could sense my hesitation. We can ensure absolute privacy if that's what you need. Discreet. The word hung in the air, taunting me. It felt like she was offering me a lifeline, a chance to disappear into the shadows with whatever this was. But I couldn't let myself back out now. Yes, I said, my voice cracking slightly. Discreet. Understood, she replied. I'll make the necessary arrangements, and you'll receive a confirmation text shortly. Please let us know if there are any changes. Is there anything else I can assist you with? I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her to stop, to take back everything I had just said, but I couldn't. My mind was numb, my body was on autopilot, and I couldn't bring myself to hang up. No, that's all. Thank you. Thank you for choosing our service, she said, and there was something chillingly normal about the way she said it, like this was just business as usual. We look forward to your experience. The line went dead, and I sat there, staring at my phone, feeling like I had just stepped into another world, one where nothing made sense anymore. I had expected to hear Sarah's voice on the other end, to confront her and demand an explanation. But instead, I was left with even more questions. Who was this woman? What kind of service was Sarah a part of? And why was it so easy to book an appointment, as if it were no different than ordering takeout? I didn't know what I'd find when I showed up tomorrow, but there was no turning back now. I needed to know the truth, even if it meant unraveling everything I thought I knew about the woman I married. The day had finally arrived, and I was barely holding it together. My head was a storm of questions, doubts, and worst-case scenarios, but I kept telling myself that tonight, I'd finally get the answers I needed. I was still reeling from that strange call, but the details had been set. All I had to do was show up. The day dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. I was in a daze, barely registering anything around me. When the afternoon rolled around, Sarah came downstairs, dressed in a sleek black dress, the kind she usually reserved for big meetings or special occasions. She had her hair neatly pinned up, and her makeup was perfect, as if she was heading to an event where she needed to impress. I was sitting at the kitchen counter, nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, when she breezed in, checking her reflection in the mirror by the door. I'm heading out for a bit, she said, almost absent-mindedly, as she grabbed her purse. I've got a work meeting. I watched her, trying to keep my expression neutral. A work meeting? I repeated, letting the words roll off my tongue. It was almost comical how easily they came out of her mouth, like she hadn't been lying to my face for months. She nodded, not really paying attention, busy adjusting the strap of her handbag. Yeah, it's an important client. I shouldn't be too late, but don't wait up, okay? She flashed me a quick smile, the kind she always gave when she thought everything was under control. And that's when I smirked. I couldn't help it. It was the kind of smile that slips out when you know something the other person doesn't. She didn't notice, but there was a bitter satisfaction in it, like I was finally holding a piece of the puzzle that she didn't know I had. Good, I said, leaning back in my chair, still watching her. Hope it goes well. I couldn't resist adding a little extra emphasis on the word good, just to see if she'd catch it. She hesitated for the briefest of moments, her eyes flicking to mine, as if she was trying to figure out why I was suddenly so agreeable. But then she shrugged it off, probably assuming I was just being supportive. Thanks, babe, she said, and with that, she was out the door. The sun had dipped below the horizon by the time I drove to the address I'd been given over the phone. My heart was pounding, my hands slick on the steering wheel. This was it, the moment everything would either make sense or shatter into even more pieces. I couldn't tell if I was more afraid of what I'd find, or of leaving without finding out anything at all. The place was a quiet, upscale hotel, tucked away on a side street where no one would pay much attention to who was coming or going. I parked my car, took a deep breath, and headed inside. The elevator ride up felt like it took forever, even though it was only a few floors. I could hear my pulse thudding in my ears as I walked down the dimly lit corridor, stopping in front of the door to the room I had booked. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Part of me wanted to turn around and leave, but I pushed that thought aside. I had to see this through. I opened the door and stepped inside, the room dark except for a faint, warm glow coming from a lamp in the corner. It smelled faintly of perfume, familiar, yet different. My senses were on high alert, every nerve feeling like it was buzzing. Then, from the shadows, a gentle, almost teasing voice called out. "Come in, marvel, and enjoy." It was calm, inviting, like the voice of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. I couldn't see who it was, but I knew I was being watched. I swallowed hard, closed the door behind me, and slowly walked toward the bed, my legs heavy with dread. I laid down, feeling the soft sheets beneath me, my heart hammering so loud I was sure it would give me away. There was a rustle in the darkness, a figure moving closer. And then, like a ghost emerging from the shadows, she stepped into the light. My breath caught in my throat as I saw her. It was Sarah. My wife. Dressed in black lace, her makeup flawless, her hair cascading down her shoulders. She didn't recognize me at first, the room was dark, and she was focused on playing her part. She climbed on top of me, her movements slow and deliberate, like she'd done this before, and leaned in close, ready to begin. But then, I spoke, my voice low, steady, and bitter. "So these are the meetings you have, dear?" I said, my eyes locking onto hers. "Well, don't stop now. The money's been paid. Why did you stop?" I watched as her face twisted with confusion, her smile faltering as she struggled to see who was underneath her. And then, when she realized it was me, her eyes went wide with shock. All the color drained from her cheeks, replaced by a deep, crimson flush. For a moment, she just stared, as if trying to wake herself up from a nightmare. But this wasn't a dream. It was real, and there was no escaping it. "Eric," she whispered, her voice barely audible, her composure crumbling before my eyes. "What are you?" I just looked back at her, my expression cold. "Go on. Isn't this what you do at your work meetings? Why stop now? I'm paying for your time, aren't I?" She scrambled off me, her hands shaking as she grabbed for her clothes, her eyes darting around the room like she was searching for a way out. "I can explain," she stammered, her voice trembling, but she didn't even try to. She knew there was no explanation that could undo what had just happened. In her panic, she pulled on her clothes, barely managing to get dressed, and then bolted for the door. I didn't try to stop her. I just watched, my heart cold, as she fumbled with the handle, yanked it open, and ran out into the hallway without looking back. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving me alone in the room, staring up at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the chaos that had just unfolded. She didn't come home that night. And I didn't expect her to. Because after what I'd just seen, I knew she had a lot more to hide, and I was only beginning to uncover the truth. I was back home, sitting on the edge of the couch, staring at that business card. It felt heavier than it should, like it was carrying the weight of everything I still didn't know. I pulled out my phone, dialed the number, and waited. The same smooth, professional voice from before picked up. "Hello, you've reached Amber's service line. How can I assist you today?" I took a second to steady my voice, trying to sound as calm as possible. "Yeah, I need to report an issue. I paid for a service tonight, but your client ran out before anything even started. I didn't get what I paid for." There was a brief silence on the other end, and I could almost hear her processing the situation. When she spoke again, her tone was polite but firm, like she was already handling damage control. "I'm terribly sorry to hear that, sir. That is not the level of service we aim to provide. Could you please give me the name of the client who was sent to you?" I swallowed, feeling a bitter taste in my mouth as I said, "Amber." "Understood," she replied, her voice calm but with a new edge to it, like she was making a mental note of everything I said. "I assure you, sir, this will be addressed immediately. That particular client will be removed from our roster. We deeply apologize for the inconvenience." I was stunned. Just like that, they were going to fire her. It was all so transactional, like this wasn't my life they were talking about, but some service mishap that could be easily fixed. Before I could fully absorb what she'd said, she continued, to make amends, we'd be happy to offer you another model tonight. We can also provide a 50% discount on your next appointment, should you choose to book with us again. I didn't even think before I answered. All right, I said, my voice colder than I intended. But let's change the location. I want the service at my home this time. There was a slight pause, as if she was momentarily thrown off, but she quickly recovered. Of course, sir. That can be arranged. May I have the address, please? I hesitated, staring at the familiar walls of my living room, the place where Sarah and I had built our life together, the life that was now crumbling around me. But I rattled off the address anyway, feeling a strange sense of detachment, like I was watching someone else do this. I'll be here all evening, I added, trying to sound casual, even though my heart was pounding. Understood. Our model will arrive at your home at the requested time, she said, her voice smooth and businesslike, as if confirming a dinner reservation. Is there anything else I can assist you with, sir? No, that's all, I said, and I hung up before she could respond. The hours crawled by after I made that call, and I was left alone in the house, stewing in my thoughts. I still couldn't believe how calmly the agency had handled everything, like it was just another business transaction gone wrong. They promised to send someone else, another model to make up for what happened. I didn't know what I was hoping to achieve by agreeing, but I felt like I needed to see this through, to understand just how deep Sarah's lies had gone. Around 11 p.m., the doorbell rang. My heart skipped a beat as I went to open it. Standing there was a woman, tall, confident, with a calm, professional smile. She was different from Sarah, but she had the same poised, alluring presence. It was like she had been trained for this, ready to play whatever part was needed. Good evening, she said softly, stepping inside. I'm here to take care of you tonight. I didn't say much. I just led her to the bedroom, trying to push down the chaos of emotions swirling inside me. Part of me felt guilty, another part felt numb, but mostly, I felt like I was finally in control of something, even if it was this twisted situation. She moved with ease, taking charge, and soon we were on the bed, our bodies tangled together. But just as things were reaching their peak, I heard the unmistakable sound of the front door opening. I froze, my heart stopping for a moment. There was no way. She wasn't supposed to be here. But the footsteps down the hallway were getting closer, and before I could react, the bedroom door burst open. Sarah stood in the doorway, her eyes wide with shock. For a few seconds, she just stared, like she couldn't process what she was seeing. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The woman on top of me quickly scrambled off, startled and confused, but I didn't move. I was too stunned, but also, ready. What the hell is this? Sarah finally managed to choke out, her voice trembling. Eric, who is this? I sat up, pulling the sheets around me, and looked her straight in the eyes. This? I said, my voice calm, almost cold. This is someone who's finishing my order. She didn't answer. She just turned and ran, nearly tripping over herself as she fled out of the room, down the hall, and out the door. The woman from the agency, still standing there awkwardly, finally looked at me. Should I go? Yeah, I muttered, waving her off. After that night, there was no going back. I didn't sleep at all, just sat there, staring at the empty bed, letting the reality of everything sink in. The next morning, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't keep living in this web of lies, and I couldn't keep pretending that somehow, things would fix themselves. It was over. I called a lawyer that same day and told them everything, how I'd caught Sarah sneaking around, how I'd discovered she was living a double life, and how she'd been working for an escort agency behind my back. I felt sick as I went over the details, but the lawyer assured me that I was doing the right thing. You have every right to protect yourself, she said, her voice calm and professional. And we'll make sure the court knows exactly what's been happening. Filing for divorce felt both terrifying and liberating. It was like ripping off a bandage, exposing the raw wound underneath. But as painful as it was, I knew it was the only way to move forward. I had spent too long living with doubt, suspicion, and betrayal. I needed to take control of my life again, and this was the first step. When Sarah was served with the divorce papers, she tried calling me, but I didn't pick up. I didn't want to hear her excuses, her apologies, or whatever lies she'd come up with to explain away everything. Instead, I focused on preparing for what was coming next, the court battle that would officially end our marriage. When the day finally arrived, I walked into that courtroom with a calm determination. I had prepared myself for this, and I was ready to lay everything out in the open. As we sat across from each other, I could see Sarah looking pale, her eyes red and tired. She barely met my gaze, and for a moment, I wondered if she'd finally realized just how far she'd fallen. But I couldn't let myself care anymore. During the hearing, my lawyer presented the evidence we had gathered, the phone records, the testimonies, and the details from the escort agency. And then, without hesitation, she brought up the part that no one in that courtroom was expecting. Your Honor, we need to address the fact that Mrs. Collins has been actively working as a sex worker, using her position at a brothel to engage in paid encounters. This is not just about infidelity, it's about a complete betrayal of trust, as well as illegal activity. The words hung in the air, heavy and damning. I could see the shock ripple through the room, even among the judge and the lawyers. Sarah's face went pale, her eyes wide with panic. She looked at me, silently pleading, but I didn't flinch. This was the truth, and I wasn't going to hide it for her anymore. Mr. Collins, the judge said, addressing me directly, is there evidence to support these claims? I nodded, my heart pounding as my lawyer handed over a stack of documents. Yes, Your Honor. I have records from the agency she was involved with, as well as evidence of payments made to her under her alias. She's been living a double life, and I was completely unaware until I discovered it myself. Sarah looked like she was about to faint. She tried to speak, but her lawyer quickly intervened, whispering something to her. It didn't matter. The damage was done, and there was no way she could deny it now. The rest of the hearing felt like a blur. My lawyer laid out the facts methodically, calmly, while Sarah's lawyer struggled to pick up the pieces. I didn't say much after that initial statement, there wasn't anything left to say. I had made my point, and I was ready to walk away from the wreckage she had caused. By the time it was over, the judge granted the divorce. Sarah didn't look at me as she left the courtroom, her head down, shoulders slumped, like the weight of everything had finally crushed her. Part of me felt a flicker of pity, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of everything she'd put me through. She had chosen this path, and now she was facing the consequences. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt a strange sense of relief. It wasn't happiness, not exactly, but it was a release. Like I could finally breathe again, without the suffocating weight of secrets and lies. My marriage was over, and my life would never be the same, but at least I was free. Free to start over, free to rebuild, and free from the lies that had torn everything apart. A few weeks after the divorce was finalized, I started to feel a sense of relief. It wasn't exactly joy, but it was something close to freedom. After everything I'd been through, all the lies, the betrayal, and the endless questions, I could finally start moving on. It was over. And then I got the news that felt like the universe throwing me a final gift. One morning, I got a call from a friend who had heard something through the grapevine. Hey, did you hear about that agency? The one, you know, the one Sarah was involved with? My heart skipped a beat. What about it? I asked, almost afraid of what was coming next. They shut it down, he said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. The whole operation got busted. Apparently, it was raided a few days ago. They've been shut down completely. I couldn't help the grin that spread across my face. You're kidding, I said, but I already knew he wasn't. So, it's done. They're out of business. Yup. The place is gone. They're facing charges, and it's all over. I felt a rush of vindication, like everything had come full circle. The place that had caused so much chaos and heartache in my life was finally gone, shut down for good. I didn't have to worry about it anymore, and I certainly didn't have to worry about Sarah going back to whatever life she was living there. It was like a chapter closing with a definitive, satisfying snap. Meanwhile, the news hit Sarah hard. I didn't see her reaction firsthand, but I heard from a mutual friend that she was struggling. She'd lost everything she thought she had control over, her secret life, her income, her whole facade. Now, she was left with nothing but the mess she'd made, and I could only imagine the realization she must have been facing. She'd thrown away her marriage, her stability, and whatever else she'd been holding on to, and it had all come crashing down. It felt like justice, in a way. I didn't have to do anything, the world had taken care of it for me. I could move on, knowing that I'd done everything I could to protect myself, and she was left to deal with the fallout of her own choices. I was happy, genuinely happy, to be free of it all, and to know that she wasn't getting away with everything she'd done. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally breathe. The lies were behind me, the secrets were exposed, and I was free to start over. Whatever came next, it wouldn't be weighed down by the past. Sarah, on the other hand, was left to pick up the pieces, and I didn't envy her one bit. Bye-bye.